guys, it's Scarlett here. I hope you're doing well today. So for today I wanted to talk about court cards. Court cards in tarot and their elemental correspondences. And I did a tarot workshop this past weekend about this, and it brought up some really interesting kind of discussions and thoughts. So I thought I would talk about it with you, my YouTube social media crew, to see what your opinions on this theory is. So before we get started, just a bit about kind of court cards in general. So I'm using here the Pagan Otherworlds deck, and I wanted to talk about kind of the elemental correspondences with the court cards. So first we have, within each suit, you have 4 different characters, I guess. So you have the page, you have the knight, you have the queen, and finally you have the king. So each of these kind of different characters represents kind of our own progression through kind of emotional maturity and development. It's kind of an easy way to think about these 4 cards. So you can think of like the pages here. Here I have the Page of Pentacles as kind of being youthful, childish, excited about learning, a large kind of world ahead, a lot to learn from, a lot to develop. And then you move into the knights. Knights, you can kind of think of that more adolescent mindset. So powerful, excitement, enthusiastic, energetic. But with that adolescent mindset comes a bit of kind of impulsiveness or immaturity in a way. But still moving on through that progression. And then you move in to the queens. And the queens, you're really bringing in kind of that feminine element, that feminine kind of concepts of compassion, more emotional maturity, a greater understanding of others through empathy and thus the world around you. And then finally, you get to the kings. The kings being the height of power and confidence in their abilities, the final complete aspect of emotional maturity and understanding. So this is just like really simplistic kind of going over this, but I thought I would just kind of start out with, so we have our pages, our knights, our queens, and our kings. So that's kind of roughly what they're about. Now in tarot, we know we have 4 different suits. So you have 4 court cards in the Pentacles suit. Then we have the suit of swords, we have the suit of cups, and then we have the suit of wands. So each of these suits has a elemental correspondence with them. So first with Pentacles here. So Pentacles are associated with the element earth. So for that, you're thinking things that are kind of like grounded in reality, that foundation. And in readings, Pentacles can often associate with things like finance, career, prosperity, things like that. Tangible, real world kind of applications. And then you have the swords. So we have our swords card here. And swords are about the mind. So they are associated with the element air, and thinking about thoughts, communication, intelligence, learning, all associated with kind of the mind and the element air. Then we move into cups. Cups being associated with the element water, and you can see kind of each of these cards has a water component to it and to the image in the background. And water being associated with emotion and relationships, and even the subconscious as well. Then finally, our last suit of wands here, associated with the element fire. Fire meaning action and passion and energy. So we have the 4 suits in tarot connected with the 4 elements. So, one really interesting theory that I had not really fully thought of before is, what if not only do the 4 suits have elemental associations, what if the individual characters in the core cards also had their own elemental correspondences? So this, what I'm talking about now, partly comes from a blog post I read, so I'll credit him, I'll link in the description below. It's Jack of Wands blog, and he talks about how, what if the pages were associated with an element, the knights with an element, the queens with an element, and the kings with an element. And if that's the case, what element would you choose for each of those court characters? So this, when I did the workshop last weekend, brought up a lot of really interesting discussions, because, you know, some people thought, you know, the pages might be fire or water, and then, you know, you kind of get to, well, why might you think that? So it's kind of like a really fun thought experiment. So I kind of agree with what the blog Jack of Wands states for his kind of correspondences he attributes to the individual court characters. But I mean, this is tarot, so I mean, you can make up your own or make your own decisions. I mean, this is not set in stone. It's not like in a book or anything like that, this part that I'm about to talk about. So he associates, and I agree, that pages, here we have our 4 pages, are associated with the element earth. And the reason I think that works is because for pages, they're the first character in our court cards, right? So they are the foundation, and you need a strong foundation, and that is associated with kind of the element earth, this kind of concept of foundation and grounding. So I think that makes sense. Then you move into your knights. So what element do you think the knights might correspond to? And I think that the knights would best match with the element of air, because we have our foundation of earth with the pages. So next we need thoughts and ideas and formulation of your own kind of ideology and morals and all of that. So that's kind of connected to that element air, so making the knights here associated with the element air. So next, queens. And queens was the easiest one for me to kind of wrap my mind around. So I think that queens match best with the element of water. And that, again, comes from that kind of feminine aspect of compassion and emotion and love and empathy, as well as that innate subconscious innate ability to kind of connect with the unconscious realm, kind of being part of this kind of concept of the feminine. So queens being associated with the element water makes a lot of sense for me, which leaves the last one, kings, being associated with fire, which I like too, because fire is kind of the ultimate creator and destroyer in a way, the ultimate force of power. So you would think that like a king would be connected with this kind of powerful force, this energy of fire. So assuming that pages could be connected with earth, knights with air, queens with water, and kings with fire, then you can create what is kind of the ultimate kind of royal court. Because if pages are associated with earth, then the ultimate expression of a page would be the page of pentacles, not the page of swords, cups, or wands. The page of pentacles, because pages are associated with earth and pentacles are associated with earth, making this kind of the first member of that kind of top royal court. Next, you have knights. So if knights are associated with air, swords, the suit of swords is associated with air, making our Knight of Swords the second member of this kind of super court. Queens, so queens being associated with water and cups being associated with water makes the Queen of Cups our ultimate queen. And then finally with wands, wands being associated with fire and kings being associated with fire makes the King of Wands the King of Kings, the ultimate king of all tarot. So now you have these kind of ultimate expressions of these elemental energies. The Page of Pentacles, the Knight of Swords, the Queen of Cups, and the King of Wands. So why does this kind of like matter? I mean, this might be, you know, really nerdy, and I'm sorry if it's like super over the top and nerdy, but I like thinking about these kind of things. So I think this is just really interesting as kind of the concepts of this kind of super court being kind of a pure representation of that elemental energy. So if you're someone that wants to better connect with an element or better understand elemental connections and concepts, the Page of Pentacles might be a good card to kind of have on an altar during a guided meditation to better connect with concepts of earth. Knight of Swords might be the best card to have a meditation with to connect with the element air. Also, if you do ever do like tarot spells or anything like that, these 4 cards would be extremely powerful cards to use for a tarot spell because they're the ultimate aspects: the King of Kings, the Queen of Queens, the Knight of Knights, and the Page of Pages, I guess. So kind of being these very powerful cards to work with in that aspect. And then you're thinking though too, I mean, if these are the ultimate expressions of that element, of that character within the court, it kind of brings it into this kind of it's more magical, less humanistic quality about it, which I think is interesting too, because you know, in tarot, we use tarot to help formulate and understand our own human lives. So it's not like we are ever going to be like 100% the Queen of Cups, you know, water with water. We might be more like the Knight of Cups, you know, connected with air energy and water energy at the same time. It being a knight connected with the suit of the element of air and cups with water. So you can kind of think of these kind of different expressions of these 2 elements combined, which is kind of more human, more complex in a way. So if you're thinking like the Page of Wands, for example, well, pages being associated with earth, wands being associated with fire, then you can think of like, well, what might combine those 2 kind of elemental properties, earth and fire? What is an earthy aspect of fire or a fiery aspect of earth? And you can think of a lot of different things. I mean, one of the things that like comes to mind is kind of like sexuality being kind of this kind of earthy aspect of fire, that fiery passion, but with something that's real and grounded in reality with our own bodies. So you can think of something like that, or you can think of, well, then you can think of something like the King of Cups, right? So kings being fire, cups being water, that kind of just doesn't work, right? It's a contradiction. But you think of, well, isn't that a great king? Isn't that a great aspect to be? Because the King of Wands, the King of Kings, fire with fire, would be obviously a very passionate, fiery, you know, powerful ultimate expression of fire. But is that who you would actually want in our human world to lead us in our real life, in our real world? You probably want someone who has that kind of internal dilemma, that fire and water, someone who has that kind of complexity. So the King of Cups being a powerful leader, as he is the king, but bringing in those water energies from the cup. So bringing in that compassion and that empathy for everyone. I think this would be an actual better leader than someone like the King of Wands. So you can have all these kind of fun thought experiments of, okay, Page of Swords, so pages being earth, swords being air. What is an earthy expression of air or an airy expression of earth? And you can just go on and on and on. And it's really interesting to see kind of what other people come up with. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you. I'm sorry this is kind of a bit of a long ramble, but the concept of our court cards, how the elements connected with the 4 suits connect with the cards themselves, and elemental correspondences within each of the suits, plus each of the characters, the page, the knight, the queen, and the king, and the creation of this kind of ultimate royal court, and how you might be able to use that if you do have any kind of magical practice or something like that too. These being very powerful cards, ultimate expressions of their element, and then but the rest of the court cards being a much better representation of our own humanity and our own complexity as humans. So let me know what you think, what your thoughts are on these court cards and their elemental correspondences, and if you agree, if you think pages associated with earth, knights with air, queens with cups, and kings with fire. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments. So I will talk to y'all later. Bye!